Welcome to EPG Pathshala. Today we'll be discussing module on the eras in inscriptions. I'm Rajat Sanyal from the Department of Archaeology, University of Calcutta. Our learning objectives for this module are to consider the importance of dates in inscriptions, the different types of reckoning in Indian inscriptions, Regnal reckoning, reckoning by era, the current reckonings, obsolete reckonings, and the contribution of these eras in inscriptions to Indian culture. Dates of inscriptions provide crucial evidence on the political, social, and economic as well as religious formations of early India. We further know that dates of inscriptions are the foremost sources for reconstructing historical chronologies. Dated art historical objects also provide cues to dating sculptures and establish chronological sequence of art historical objects as well as different schools of art history in different periods. As we all know that inscriptions provide dates in two major ways. One is they are dated in terms of the regnal year of the king, which is called the regnal reckoning, and then the dates are specified within a certain era, which is usually termed the reckoning by era. The earliest epigraphic records, if we look at the regnal type of recording, are dated in terms of regnal years and not that of any of the later established systems of reckoning by era. D.C. Sarkar has cited numerous epigraphical references to reckoning of dates in terms of regnal years, dating between the 3rd century BCE and the 12th century CE, that is, from the early historic period till the latest centuries of the early medieval period. If we look at the pattern of evolution of era from regnal reckoning to era reckoning, we find that in early records of the Gupta kings, the date is simply recorded as a samvat, meaning a year, not specifying any name. Later, the same era came to assume the name Gupta. D.C. Sarkar suggested that all the eras in early India developed in this manner. Initially, from the regnal reckoning of a ruler, which is continued by his successor in later years, and finally takes the shape of a date under a particular era. All the inscriptions of Ashoka, if we look at the examples, are dated in regnal era. In this inscription, the famous Rumbinda inscription, you see that the term Visati Vasa Visitena means after 20 years of coronation, that is coronation of Ashoka, that this inscription was written. The same is the case with the well-known, rather famous Besnagar pillar inscription of 2nd century BCE, where we again find that one Kashiputra Bhagabhadra, he is known to have been a Shunga ruler, to whose court one Yavanaduta, a Heliodorus, a Yavanaduta who came to his court as an ambassador, he engraved this inscription, and here again the king Kashiputra Bhagabhadra is being called Chatudasengna Rajana Vadhamanasa, meaning he is ruling prosperously in the 14th year of reign. Another example of a later period is the Mahendrapali inscription from Paharpur, where we have the Sambat 5 denoting the date in terms of regnal year of this Pala king, found from the site of Paharpur in Bangladesh. This is another more later inscription. It is not dated in precise terms, but paleographically this can be dated to the 12th century. Here we see that the term Samvata 18, meaning Samvat 18, is written. We are not certain whether it's the Samvat of a particular king or a particular era, but probably this represents the year of reign of a king whose name is not engraved here. But this is again another example of the use of reckoning by regnal years. Here in an 11th century inscription we see, dated in the reign of the Pala king Mahipal, that his Sambat 33, that is his ruling year 33, is recorded on the stone slab, as you can clearly see. The second type of reckoning, and the most widely used type of reckoning in South Asian inscriptions, is the reckoning by era. Here we see two different types of reckonings prevalent in early India. One is called current era and the other one is called the obsolete era. If we look at reckoning by current era, dates are expressed in both of these ways when the dates are recorded in the years of an era that is extant and is in practice, it is a current era. When the dates of inscriptions are expressed in an era of which the years are reckoned as former or lost, the concerned era is called an obsolete era. Some major current eras of reckoning used in early Indian inscriptions are Vikrama era and Shaka era, the two most famous and well-known systems of reckonings, besides the Jupiter 60-year cycle, the Kollam era, the Lakshmana Sena Sambat, the Newari Sambat, as well as the modern Christian era, which is the only era that is recognized throughout the world now in modern days. If we look at the obsolete eras, here again we have a long list of eras found from inscriptions precisely. These are the Parthian or Arsacid era, the Kalachuri or Chedi era, the Gupta or Pallavi era, the Jupiter's 20-year cycle, the Ganga or Gangeya era, the Harsha era, and the Bhaumukara era. Now we may look into the details of some of the current and the obsolete eras and how these came to be known to the historians on the basis of epigraphical records they're studying. This is important for not only historical reconstruction but also as sources. They're very important for historians and archaeologists. We may start with the Vikrama era, which was initiated in 57 or 58 CE. BCE. The Vikramabda or Vikram Sambat was started in the year 57 or 58 BCE. This is one of the most significant system of reckoning used in hundreds of inscriptions. Earlier, the era was used under the names like Krita, as we see at the Badwa stone inscription from Kota, Rajasthan, or under the name Malava era, as evidenced at the Mandasur inscription of the time of Kumara Gupta and Bandhu Varman. The Mandasur inscription says Malavanang Ganasthitya in recording the date of the inscription. The system of reckoning came to be known as Vikramabda or Vikrama Sambat only from about the 9th century CE. The initiation of all the eras of reckoning in early India are debated. There are several controversies regarding the commencement of the dates of each of the era, and Vikrama Sambat is no exception to that. If we look at the debate over its commencement, we find that the initiation of the Vikrama era has been conceived particularly in the light of this very important inscription from Bajaur, issued in the 63rd regnal year of one Maharaja, the king Aya. This inscription is dated in his Atita Rajya, or the expression is the 63rd year of Atita Maharaja Aya, which means the inscription was dated in the expired year of this Maharaja Aya. This Aya is identified with Asas of the Shaka. B.N. Mukherjee has unimpeachably demonstrated that Aya or Asas I had introduced a new era. Mukherjee argued on firm grounds that the year 58 or 57 BCE should be the date of introduction of this new era named after Asas I. The calculation of the Vikrama era should be done through deduction of 56 or 57 with reference to the month a specific inscription refers to. In the case of a current Vikrama era, however, the number to be deducted is 57 or 58. Thus, the recorded date in Vikrama era in inscription minus 56 or 57 equals to the common era. Similarly, the recorded date of an inscription in Vikrama era minus 57 or 58 comes to the common era for in the case of current reckoning. Now we may turn to the Shaka era. Of all the eras occurring in Indian inscriptions, the most frequently and widely used one is the Shaka era. Various names like Shakanripa Kale, Shakavarshe Vatiteshu, Shakavarshe, Shalivahana Shake, etc. are used for this era. The earliest historical record that documents the use of the Shaka era is the Bard inscription of Sukatuvarman found from Maharashtra, Thane district. If we look at the initiation and geographical distribution of the Shaka era, it came to be regular epigraphic usage from the time of the Chalukyas of South India around the 6th century CE. The era is also widely used in western Gujarat and Saurashtra, eastern India, that is in Bengal, Bihar, Odisha and Assam, and central Indian territories adjacent to eastern Deccan. Among the Southeast Asian states, Java and Cambodia has a long tradition of recording dates in terms of Shaka era. Thus, it had a fairly wide geographical distribution of usage. Like the Vikrama era again, the commencement of the Shaka era is also debated. Vidya-mitra Shastri, for example, believed that the Western Kshatrapa king Chashtana is more appropriate to be credited for the introduction of the Shaka era, contrary to the general notion that Kanishka I of the Kushana dynasty was responsible for the introduction of this era. B.N. Mukherjee more recently has shown, in the light of a critical analysis of both epigraphic and the numismatic evidence of the Kshatrapa rulers, that Chashtana did not initiate this era. He was not responsible for the commencement of this era, but actually he used the era introduced originally by Kanishka I. And the Kanishka era of year 78 has been used by the former as the Shaka era, which means Chashtan followed the era established by Kanishka I of the Kushana dynasty. Here we can see the two most prominent evidence of Kanishka I. As we all know, apart from his several numismatic evidences, the famous statue of Kanishka I, which is kept in the Indian Museum, the majority of the opinions are in favor of the date of coronation of Kanishka I as the beginning of the Shaka era. It is almost generally accepted that the dates appearing on the inscriptions of Kanishka and his successors are to be taken to stand for the Shaka era. These dates should represent the earliest set of evidence of this era in Indian inscriptions. Again, if we look at the method of calculation of the era from the Shaka era to the conversion of the Christian era, we can see that theoretically the commencement of the Shaka era is believed to have taken place on first day of Chaitra 78 CE. I may mention here that the months of this era end with Chaitra, as in modern India, and the months end with the new moon. Years expressed in Shaka era can be converted to Common Era by adding 78 or 79 to the year expressed in the inscription, keeping in mind the month mentioned in the record. This means if the months recorded in the inscriptions are after the month of Pausha, then we have to add 79, and if the months recorded in the inscriptions is either the month recorded in the inscription is before Pausha, we'll have to add 78 with the Shaka era to come to the Common Era. Thus, finally, the scheme of calculation is Shaka era plus 78 or 79 C equals to the Christian era. Now the third one, again a very important system of era reckoning of ancient India, which is the Gupta or the Pallavi era. The Gupta era was current in northern, western and parts of eastern India. This era was in regular reckoning in inscriptions of these regions. The era remained current under the rule of the Maitraka kings, one of the major feudatories of the Guptas in the Pallavi region. The latest inscriptional record, if we look at the chronological range, the latest inscriptional record dated under the Gupta Pallavi era is found from Beral in Gujarat, where 945 Pallavi era is recorded. This is equal to 1264 CE, that is in the second half of the 13th century. This is one of the latest records of the Pallavi era on Indian inscriptions. Now, if we get back to the earliest instance of its evidence from Indian epigraphs, the earliest one is the era called Samvatsara and its variations. Samvatsara and its varying abbreviations, but their most early use is again debated. Al-Biruni also recognized the era under the same name. This means this era was quite in vogue in India in the 11th century because Al-Biruni came to India in 1030 CE, as we all know. Probably the Mathura inscription of Chandragupta II provides the earliest evidence of the use of this era in Indian inscriptions. According to the calculations of John Faithful Fleet, the Gupta era had commenced on the first lunar day of Chaitra in 319 CE with months ending in the new moon day. Thus, if we calculate, the current Gupta era has to be converted by adding 320 or 321 with the Gupta era to come to the Common Era or the Christian era. Expired years of the Gupta era, because in many of the inscriptions we find that the years are expressed as Atita Samvatsara or Samatita Samvatsara. In these expired years, the era has to be converted into the Common Era by adding 319 with this system of reckoning. In the case of Western Indian Pallavi era, which is a parallel of the Gupta Pallavi era of Eastern and Northern India, the southern system of conversion of Kartika ending Amanta system has to be followed. What is Kartika ending Amanta system? The year ends in Kartika and the month ends in new moon, unlike the Chaitra ending, new moon ending Shaka system. Therefore, the final calculation of dates for this era is to the inscription in Gupta era plus 318 or 319 CE for the expired years, and inscription in the Gupta era plus 319 or 312 equals to the Common Era for current years. Now, another most important and most widely used era in early Indian inscriptions was the Kalachuri Chedi era. From the 5th to the 13th century CE, this Kalachuri Chedi era was in use in more than 100 inscriptions of central and western India. In terms of comparative chronology, inscriptions dated in the Kalachuri Chedi era can be divided into two distinct classes or groups. One is the early group, the other one is the later group. The early group are inscriptions dated between the 5th and the 8th century. The Traikutaka, the early Kalachuri, and Gurjara records of Western India, the inscriptions of the Chalukyas of Gujarat, and those of some of the contemporary minor lineages of Western Deccan belong to this group. Now, if we look at the later group of inscriptions, they are dated between the 9th and the 13th century. The Kalachuri inscriptions and epigraphs of their successors of central India are grouped under this category. But here, the names Kalachuri Sambat, Chedi Sambat, or Chedi Dishta Sambat are found in the inscriptions of this group, unlike the inscriptions of the first group, where we don't have the use of this particular term, Chedi or Chedi Kalachuri. If we look at the chronological limit of the Kalachuri Chedi era, we find that the earliest undisputed use of this era is encountered in a Traikutaka record, the Traikutakas of Ballavi, their record, dated in the year 207 of the Kalachuri Chedi era, which falls around 457 CE. The latest inscriptional record, on the other hand, mentioning this era, is one copperplate inscription of the Kalachuris of Ratanpur. It's a different branch of the Kalachuris, as you all know that Kalachuris had several different branches. On this inscription of the Kalachuris of Ratanpur, dated in 969 Kalachuri era, the year comes to finally 1218 CE. Here again, the issue of its commencement is controversial. Origin of this era is in general not properly known. Some scholars have attempted to explain the initiation with the coronation of one Abhira king named Ishwaradatta or Ishwarasena. A recently discovered coin of this king shows the date 154, which should stand for the Shaka era, which in that case has to be dated in 232 or 233 Common Era. Vidya-mitra supports the connection of Ishwaradatta with the Kalachuri Chedi era on the basis of his solitary record of the coin. DC Sarkar, however, has argued that this is not a comprehensive method and does not lead to any particular solution to this problem. Franz Kielhorn, the famous German Indologist, he suggested that this era was started on the 26th day of July, 249 Common Era, that is the first lunar day of the month of Bhadra of the current Vikrama era. Thus, he converted the Chedi Kalachuri era into Common Era in terms of its connection or in terms of its relation with the Vikrama era. But later, he changed his opinion and suggested instead the 5th day of September of 248 CE as the date of commencement of this era. The years in the Kalachuri Chedi era are to be converted to the Common Era by adding the year 248 or 249 with the Kalachuri era, and then it comes to the common or the Christian era of reckoning. Now we will look into another important obsolete era which was quite widely used in Indian inscriptions. This is the Nepali or Newari Sambat. This era has been used throughout the medieval period. It is still under current use in many of the traditional Nepalese regions, and therefore it's one of the current eras of the two types of reckoning, obsolete and current. This belongs to the current variety And this is recorded not only in inscriptions but also in a large number of manuscripts. The term Nepalabda or Nepalavatsa, Varsha, are found on inscriptions in Sanskrit and local languages of northern India from a considerably early date. Franz Kielhorn traced its commencement on 20th October of 879 CE based on his calculations. Alexander Cunningham, almost at the same point of time, opined that Raghavadeva, one of the Nepalese kings, he was the founder of this era. However, R.C. Majumdar suggested that the date of the Raghavadeva inscription actually denotes the Shaka era, from where the digit 800 was expelled to come to the Nepali era. So it was again a modification from the Shaka era. The Newari or Nepali era can be converted into the common era by adding 878 or 879 depending on the current or the obsolete era it is representing in the inscription, and then the final date in Christian or common era can be achieved. So if we summarize content of the course, we find that dates in early Indian inscriptions are recorded in terms of regnal years. This is in the case of the early records, although this continued, as we have seen in the very beginning, till the early medieval or even the later medieval periods. Regnal years of earlier kings are then followed as eras by their followers. Reckonings by both regnal year and year of an era were common in early India. The system of era reckoning were of two types. One was the current era or the era which is in practice, and an obsolete era which is not in practice but is always represented in terms of an expired era. The major current eras are the Vikrama era, the Shaka era, and the Lakshmana Sen era, the last being prevalent in parts of Eastern India, particularly Bihar. Major obsolete eras are the Parthian era, the Kalachuri era, and the Gupta Pallavi era. You have to remember that all the eras, their dates of commencement are mostly debated. In many cases, their dates of commencement are not properly known, and even accepted dates of commencements are frequently questioned by other authorities. But this is the general pattern of the occurrence of the era in inscriptions and the calculations for converting these dates in these particular era into the common era. Thank you.